Boy, there is so much to talk about with this new great war in the Middle East, which seems to be expanding by the day. I talked about yesterday about how Israel has ordered the evacuation of 1 million people, which we know is impossible. And I saw a very, very long Twitter post by Scott Horton, in which he summed the whole thing up by saying, "You're being psyoped by Hamas." And he's not coming at this as as like some pro-Israel guy saying that, there's a psyop, Hamas is making you think that that innocent children are being murdered in Gaza, and that the Israelis are killing much more, Palestinians than Hamas ever killed Israelis. It's like, no, that's not what he means. What he's getting at is very clever, and he's trying to actually analyze, believe it or not, the effectiveness of terrorism and why people commit terrorism. Something that almost no one, especially in American media, is trying to do. They are playing, they're making no attempt to try and understand the situation, what's going on, what Hamas did, why they did it. I tried, I was kind of striking out, I had my guesses, but I think Scott's theory makes a lot of sense. And he invokes examples of other terrorists in the past 30 years who did similar things. And so what his basic point is, and I guess I'll just link to this tweet because it's more like an article than a tweet, honestly. It's very long by Twitter standards, hard to read on your phone. Anyway, Hamas, he thinks, in doing that really, really bad attack, was trying to provoke a reaction from Israel that would be so much worse. Which, remember, on the first day when it happened, I said, why would Hamas do this? Because the reaction from Israel is going to be so much worse. Even if they're just angry and they wanted to kill a bunch of Israelis and cause them harm, Israel's going to come back and kill 10 times as many people on their side. But Scott says, actually, yes, that was their intention. That is the point. They are trying to provoke this reaction from Israel. They want Israel to be worse than they are. They want Israel to come and kill innocent civilians in Gaza because that is going to make their side look more sympathetic. Israel's reaction is going to be so extreme that to the rest of the Arab world especially, who they're trying to appeal to, because the Arab world has become, over the past few years, increasingly close to Israel. He wants the rest of the Arab world, particularly the leadership, because obviously, like the populations, the average Joes or I guess it would be average Ibrahims and Mohammeds in the Middle East, they are very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. But he wants people like, the Sunni monarchs to look at Israel in a way to where they see them not as potential strategic partners, but as people who are beyond the pale and who are too cruel, even by their standards, too cruel even by Saudi standards, for example, to do business with. And when you look at what Saudi Arabia has done over the past few years to Yemen, and how many hundreds of thousands of people, potentially over 1 million, who knows, but I think it's still in the hundreds of thousands officially, who have been killed as a direct result of Saudi Arabia's intervention in their next door neighbor. So basically the same thing that Israel is about to do to Gaza, wanting to control them and, in doing so, killing masses and masses of people. And to be fair, whatever Israel's about to do, I'm sure is not going to be nearly as deadly as what the Saudis have done in Yemen over the past few years, because that did take multiple years. Even if, Mohammed bin Salman himself doesn't feel personally offended so much by what Israel's doing, the public pressure inside of Saudi Arabia, the PR nightmare of being associated with Israel could become so toxic that even he and his fellow Arab monarchs in places like, Bahrain or Qatar or the UAE which all have their own, they are all different. They're not all the same. I'm not trying to imply that they're all just like Saudi Arabia. They all have different alliances and things in their own independent sort of strategies geopolitically. And so this, I'm not saying this is necessarily true because I'm not a mind reader. I can't read Hamas's mind. But it is something that would make the events of the past, this past weekend make more sense. Last Saturday, when they went in and just, killed a bunch of civilians, rounded people up, took them, I said, okay, well, they're trying to get hostages as leverage, and, these guys are pretty angry, okay, so that's why they killed civilians or whatever. But the reaction to this has got to be really bad, right? Well, no, if the reaction is part of the benefit, it's not just the leverage of capturing civilians and holding them hostage to try and negotiate them away. If it's that plus the victimization of the ordinary civilians in Gaza, half of which, need I remind you, are under the age of 18. They are minors. And it's not like all those people, are like 17. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, most of them are children. Look at it that way. Kids running around. That's who's going to suffer the brunt of the collective punishment that was going to be meted out by the IDF. And American Zionists tell us that this is okay because Israel dropped leaflets and gave them a warning and said, hey, we're going to level your neighborhoods and, get out while you still can. And anyone who stays, who is caught in the crossfire in this war, well, that's Hamas's fault. Well, you know what? As much of a role as Hamas is playing in this, Israel has their own agency. Hamas, they want to argue that Hamas controls everything that goes on in Gaza and even the West Bank, where Hamas has no power. But one thing that Hamas doesn't control is the IDF. And so reasonable people who aren't already shills for Israel, because those people will never change. Ron DeSantis, I mean, you listen to him, oh my God, I heard an exchange between him and like a voter who walked up to him, in a small campaign stuff. He was like in a convenience store or something, and this guy's arguing with him about it, and he's saying, hey, there's videos of dead kids. Don't you have anything to say? Isn't it bad? He said, hey, obviously, very bad. Hamas, bad guys, they killed innocent people and kidnapped them. Everyone agrees that's bad. But isn't it also very bad when Israel does the same thing? And it was just all equivocation. It was like, well, when Israel does it, it's okay. Or when Israel does it, well, that's Hamas's fault. Human shields. Well, when Israel does it, well, those people wouldn't have died if Egypt absorbed them into their country. So when these people are, Israel went and all Israel did was go in and ethnically cleanse some neighborhoods. And, the fact that those people who were being ethnically cleansed had nowhere to go, that's Egypt's fault, because they should have just opened their borders so that the victims of ethnic cleansing could have been pushed out more efficiently, rather than just being, killed by the invading army. These are the arguments of American Zionists like Ron DeSantis. Trump, on the other side, apparently is prepared to wage his own personal jihad against Benjamin Netanyahu because Netanyahu recognized Joe Biden as the legitimate president of the United States, which is pretty funny. I guess it doesn't really have anything to do with the kids that are being killed. And again, on both sides, when kids die, or adults, or innocent civilians, enemy combatants, that's one thing, That's a different kind of mourning. People who sign up to fight in a war, they know what they're getting into. Although on the Israeli side, they have conscription. So that's, maybe you mourn them, a little more. Because if you're in the IDF, a lot of those people not necessarily want to be there. In fact, I've seen videos of draft riots in Israel. Anyway, I guess going back to Scott's original point about Hamas, this is basically an accelerationist theory of Hamas's actions. Because the Palestinians have been like boiling frogs ever since 1948, when they were initially cleansed from what is today Israel proper, Israel's pre-67 borders, when all the Palestinians, say for what is it now, 20% of the Israeli population, when the vast majority of them were all ethnically cleansed and forced into either the West Bank or Gaza. And ever since, tensions just sort of every few years, they ratchet up with Israel, and of course the Israeli side is always going to blame the Palestinians for that. But the Palestinians know, if you look at the West Bank, the Israelis have been annexing more and more territory within the West Bank. The area that they're in has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If you're it's very easy to understand how someone can look at that over a multi-decade process. It's been, 80 years? 75 years, right, since 1948. Over that time, their situation has gotten worse and worse. And it's easy to see how someone would come to the conclusion because the Israelis have been able to do that because it has been a slow process. Slowly and slowly, they've been pushing the Palestinians into a tighter and tighter area, and it's going at a turtle's pace. It would probably take another 75 years, to completely, I guess, absorb the West Bank and do away with the, with the Palestinians living there. And so they see that and they say, you know what? No, we need the situation. We need this to come to a head now, because there is no hope for things to get better. Things can only get worse. And so, if we rip the Band-Aid off and make it clear, put Israel in the position to where they either have to kill us all right now, or they back off, the rest of the Arab world will feel politically compelled to step in. That very well might be their play here. And to that end, we have seen now Mohammed bin Salman and the president of Iran, two great enemies, Saudi Arabia and Iran, hold a 45-minute phone conference call on this very topic, on how to deal with it and sort of their common interests in protecting the Palestinians. That's something that Israel does not want to see. Israel has worked long and hard. In fact, I think Israel's entire feud with Iran is rooted in Israel's desire to be closer to the Sunni Muslim governments. Israel, once upon a time, was on perfectly good terms with Iran even after the revolution. It was really only into the 90s when Israel started to pivot away from, being in a feud with countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Egypt goes back to Camp David, so leave Egypt out of this. But I think Jordan and Saudi Arabia, they tried to start moving closer towards them, since those were very close neighbors of theirs in the 90s. Also allies of the U.S. and the West. It made sense for them to move away from Iran, and one way that they could signal some common ground between them and a country like Saudi Arabia is by taking a hard line against Iran. But now, Israel may just be reuniting those two great blood enemies, the Persians and the Arabs. And what unites them in this is a concern for their fellow Muslims, which I think is much stronger than what unites Israel and Saudi Arabia, namely a hatred for Persians. So when you look at all these pieces on the board, I think that the situation may be coming to a head. I think that Israel's actions over the next couple of weeks will be pivotal. No matter what Israel does inside of Gaza, you're going to see a lot of pictures and videos coming out of dead kids from Gaza. It's inevitable. It's one of the most densely populated places on Earth. It's 141 square miles, I think, that is inhabited by 2 million people. Those 1.1 million people that Israel is ordering to evacuate, guess what? They got nowhere to go. What are they going to do? Oh, go to southern Gaza. It's like, okay, you mean walk like 2 blocks down the street? It's like, and what do you do with the people who can't move? What do you do with the old people who are in the hospital and sick? I'm already hearing, when I've seen pictures of, people driving who have been blown up, that's being blamed on Hamas, saying that Hamas is the one killing the Palestinians. It's like, okay, and all the other Palestinians are in on it. The people who got blown up, who are walking around, are going, oh my God, Israel bombed us, and it was actually Hamas, and they're just covering for Hamas. Is that how much the rest of the Palestinians love Hamas, that they will let them, let Hamas murder a bunch of them, and they will then open, on social media, not even criticize him? I mean, I'm not saying that that it's impossible for a totalitarian regime or something to have that strong of a control to where they would be able to maintain power under using that kind of terror tactics against its citizens. But don't you think you'd hear at least some dissent from within Gaza about that they're not just a hive mind willing to get blown up for the sake of by their own people, for the sake of anti-Israel propaganda? It just sounds like a deranged conspiracy theory. I don't know what else to call that. It's either that or, oh, they were human shields. It's like, there is nowhere in Gaza that doesn't have people. So anytime that Israel goes in and attacks Gaza, it's a big city. So of course you're going to kill civilians every time you do that, and then they're all human shields. Well, where the so-called human shields supposed to go? Where are the fighters going to go? It's just insane. And it doesn't matter if people in America want to believe that or not. This show is not meant to appeal to an audience of Americans. They're trying to appeal to an audience of elites from the rest of the Muslim world. There are continued skirmishes between Israel and some groups in both Lebanon, southern Lebanon, and Syria. It is unclear whether or not this is actually the governments of Syria and Hezbollah. It's almost certainly not the government of Lebanon, but because apparently there are a lot of Palestinian fighters who happen to be in Syria and Lebanon. But have supposedly very serious American pundits and avowed Zionists like Ben Shapiro, who are already talking about using nuclear weapons. Which, wait, by the way, I thought the Zionists tell us that Israel doesn't have nuclear weapons and that that's just a conspiracy theory. But we're being told by Ben Shapiro that this could escalate very quickly to being a nuclear conflict. I don't see how that's going to happen. Are they saying that Iran is going to launch nuclear weapons that they don't have? So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.